The exact cause of the disaster is not known. In the morning on 7th February, the villagers at a Raini village in Uttarakhand's Chamoli district just saw this huge cloud of, let's say, white sediments just rushing through the river valley, Rishiganga river valley, and then there was the barrage of 13.2 megawatt Rishiganga hydropower project broke. Um, More than 50 people died there. Then this barrage was on the Rishiganga river, which meets the Ganga river downstream. So around 4 kilometers from here, from the Rishiganga's barrage, was the 520 megawatt dam Tapovan Vishnugad of NTPC was under construction. That, like, imagine a 13.2 megawatt dams barrage and then a huge barrage for a 520 megawatt hydropower project. This also got damaged, and many people, more than 100, died or are missing, let's say, because bodies are still being recovered. So more than 100 bodies are missing here. So in total, more than the numbers later were speculated to be higher. So more than 200 people are supposed to be missing, out of which some bodies have been found. This is what happened. The reason has not been known yet. There are various teams that are trying to find out what really happened. There could have been a snow avalanche, is a possibility, is what is coming up. There could have been a landslide in the upper reaches near in one of the glaciers near the Nanda Devi, and there could have been a mix of a snow avalanche and a landslide, or there could have been a water body in the glacier that broke, that just got exposed after a landslide or an avalanche hit, which just caused floods downstream. So there are a number of possibilities of what might have really happened, but there is no certain answer as of now, and it will take time for researchers to really ascertain as to what really happened that caused these floods. So in this particular case of the Rishiganga project, it is very it's not shocking, because this is what happens in hydropower construction. You never know what is there on paper and what is happening on the ground, because this was supposed to be a hydropower project, but mining of riverbed material was happening, and because of that, blastings were being undertaken, and the villagers collected money, hired a lawyer, approached the High Court. The High Court gave two orders in 2019 to stop the blastings. The blasting didn't stop. The villagers approached the NGT. The NGT formed a team to assess what is happening. Nothing really happened. So the case is still pending in the High Court. The villagers have given up, and nothing really came out of the NGT when they approached the NGT. So this is the case of the Rishiganga project. What happened in Uttarakhand on February 7 is being equated to what happened in the state in 2013, where a number of rivers got flash flooded and thousands of people died. Like, the official number is around 4,000, but unofficially it is said that more than 20,000 people would have died in the 2013 disaster, which especially hit hard in the Kedarnath Valley, wherein there was a glacial lake breach. It's called a GLOF, or a glacial lake outburst flood. Because of the monsoon rains, the glacier breached, and many people, thousands of people in the valley died because of the flood that happened because of this GLOF, the glacial lake outburst flood. So people are equating the current tragedy to 2013 because a flood happened here as well. And this was again a flood in February is something very unexpected. There has been no history of such an occurrence in Uttarakhand, but people are equating it to 2013 because there is a suspicion that a glacial lake could have breached, but it's just a suspicion. Like, there is no proof of whether that happened or not. Currently, there are a number of teams of different scientists from different agencies who are trying to find out what happened, but nothing has been really said. The speculations currently are that there could have been a snow avalanche, there could have been a landslide, there could have been a mix of these. A part of a glacier could have been broken off. Maybe there was a restoration, a lake formation within the glacier that that just burst because of a certain sudden landslide or an avalanche that hit this lake area. So there are speculations. But what we do know is the eventuality, which is a flood. And in that case, what we see is that a flood happened, and this flood was disastrous. People died, and this is what happened in 2013 as well. Like, there were floods and people died, and that is why people are equating it to 2013, uh, because similar floods had happened, and dams were also at the center of controversy at that time, to such an extent that the Supreme Court in August 2013 had advised, or had asked the MOEF, the Central Environment Ministry, to form an expert body to assess whether dams had exacerbated the 2013 disaster. Such a committee was formed in October 2013. It's called the Chopra Committee. It had 11 members. It was headed by Dr. Ravi Chopra, who is an environmentalist from Dehradun. And the committee submitted its report in 2014. And the report clearly said that yes, dams did exacerbate the disaster at that time, because let me give you an instance. The issue of muck dumping. All the dam structures that were being constructed, they were dumping the muck in the riverbeds, raising the riverbeds, which eventually led to, the floods being experienced at a higher intensity than would have happened if there were no raised riverbeds. Other than that, what also was said in the report is that there shouldn't be any dams in the paraglacial regions, regions which are near the glacial areas, because the glaciers, they will disintegrate, they might melt. There could be so many activities in these regions, and these activities will bring with them many things. For example, sediments, moraines, boulders, and these might fill dam reservoirs. And if a flood happens, all these collected materials will rush downstream, with the floods, and will create even worse situation downstream of these dams. Also, what happens is, if you just talk of water in a flood, water will have a certain damaging capacity. But when this water is, when debris is added to this water, boulders are added to this water, the capacity to create havoc, the intensity with which this hits this water, which has debris mixed with it, is immense. It is more than what would have been experienced if there was just plain water that was, if there was just a flood which had only water in it. So when in 2013, when the dam structures were broken at various places, what was seen is that there was immense damage, downstream of these areas, downstream of these damaged barrages. Like, there could have been a certain damage above these barrages where floods happened, and downstream of the barrages, it just escalated the damage because of how debris was added to water, and the kind of disaster it created downstream of these dams. This happened in 2013, downstream of various dams across the state, and which was what was put out in the Chopra Committee report. The report also was asked to assess 24 proposed dams, and it said that 23 out of these 24 dams must not ever be constructed. But unfortunately, there was a case ongoing in the Supreme Court regarding dam construction in Uttarakhand, and Chopra Committee report was supposed to be key to that case, but unfortunately, the case is still ongoing, and as you can see, dam construction is still happening in Uttarakhand. So in this case as well, we know of the disaster mainly because it just created such there were deaths in areas of these barrages, and that's how we know that disaster happened, because you see immense damage that was done near and downstream of these barrage structures, because the flood waters came in, rushed through them, broke these structures, and then their destructive capacity also increased, and there was muck dumped already in the river, which again increased the destructive capacity of water. So all this is similar to what happened in 2013 as well. It's the same story, it's just a different valley where this happened, at this time. So that's why there is so much comparison to what happened in 2013. calling the Uttarakhand disaster natural is not entirely correct. This is because there are human interference that have been there over the years that have exacerbated the disaster. For instance, if you look at the tragedy, there's a flood that happened, and that flood um was could be a natural process, could be, but there was a dam on the path of the flood, and downstream of the dam you see a lot of devastation. All the deaths that have happened have been around these dam structures, which are more than 200 deaths so far. So that too because it was a Sunday. Had it been a regular weekday, there would have been 500 plus construction workers in total, working on these dam sites. So you see devastation downstream of these barrages, which is why we say that the disaster was exacerbated by these dam structures. Had there been no dams, it would have been a flood. It would have been you could call it a natural disaster, but because of these dam structures, you can't call it a natural disaster anymore. It is to a certain extent man-made because these structures have been put there by humans. So that is one reason. The other reasons are that there have been red flags all through, like climate change is a reality now. There are reports, research works which say that glaciers are degenerating, they are receding, snow is melting faster, the snow cover is thinning. Himalayas are all about these things. They're all about glaciers, all about snow. Irrespective of that, we have these structures in place near glacial regions or in paraglacial regions. So if there is, let's say, an increased flow of water near a glacier, obviously any man-made structure on path of this will get impacted on path of this flood that happens. If a glacier melts very, very quickly, if there's an avalanche. If there is a man-made structure, if there is a barrage, a dam structure on the path of this occurrence, it will get impacted. And when it gets impacted, it will create havoc downstream, which is what we saw on 7th of February. So because of these reasons, we can't call it a completely natural disaster. It would be wrong to say that it was a natural disaster. It would be naive, I would say, to call it just a natural disaster. Talk about the 13.2 megawatt Rishiganga hydropower project that got damaged, the barrage of which got damaged in this deluge. Blastings were being undertaken in this for a long time. The villagers had approached the High Court. The High Court had ordered in June 2019 that the blastings must immediately be stopped. But the blastings continued. They became a bit infrequent, maybe once a day, but they did continue. And they only stopped a few months ago when this hydropower project became operational. So blasting means that you're making this area more prone to landslides because you're shaking the entire region. That's also, this is what happens when you have, hydropower projects constructed in these fragile regions, that norms are not followed, such practices are undertaken, and that could lead to severe disasters. So we don't know how blastings could have impacted the region actually. So calling any disaster in this area entirely natural is not correct. Other than that, what happens is, and what happened in this region as well, is that for the construction of the projects, the muck that was being excavated was being dumped into the river itself. So the norm says that you have to dump it elsewhere. You have to have a specific area where you're dumping construction material, the muck. But as in the muck that you excavate. But what was happening is that the muck was being dumped within the river, raising the riverbed. It just means that if a flood ever happens, the capacity of the river to contain more water has been reduced. The riverbed has been raised. So if a flood comes in, it will take in more muck with itself and destroy the downstream areas even more than would have happened if there was no muck disposed into the riverbed. So muck was being disposed as well. So, and you also see in this case that all the damage that has happened beneath the downstream of these barrages. So how can we disconnect the flood from how dam construction practices were being undertaken in this area?